Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. Always my pleasure. Right here is to stop and to acknowledge a couple of things that I know that are very expensive, that I recognize that our guest also is expensive for them because anyone that is in this journey understand the value of what I'm about to talk about, the value of time. It is one of the most precious gift given to every single one of us. And the beautiful thing about it is 24 hours. No one can argue with the other that I don't have the same time. What we do with that time will dictate who we become and who we are. The other, our journey. Aaron has his journey that made him who he is today. And we are honored that he came to share and to allow us into that space so that we can, from that conversation, get insights so that we can become better human spirits while we're here and become as beautiful as he is. Aaron, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you for having me, Ken. I'm looking forward to this.
It is an honor, man. Tell the folks how you serve mankind, because I tell them that's the ultimate prize that we get to experience while we're here.
Yeah, a lot of what you just said rings true in the work that I do on a daily basis. And I'm a firm believer that us as humans, we're all seeking our next best version. We're all seeking on how to play a bigger role, how to make a bigger impact, how to serve others. And then, most importantly, how do we continue to grow as a human? How do we show up and be better in our roles, whether it's that professional role or the personal roles that we serve of
Yep.
husband, wife, mother, father? What I do is I really help work with those leaders who are looking to make that step. And as you just mentioned, time is our most precious commodity. And
Yep.
so what I do is I connect with people to accelerate their path to their next best version, and I save them time. So I really help provide a springboard to get them where they want to go faster through a lot of my frameworks, tools, and programs that can save them a lot of the headache and heartburn that comes along with the journey of being able to share and provide lessons from my experiences of some of the mistakes and setbacks that I've made. So I really help people get to where they want to go much more quickly to develop the best version of themselves.
That is awesome. I love how you put it. And you guys, I know it just started, but what Aaron said is such a powerful lesson. And I'm hoping that you are hearing what he says, because I tell them, Aaron, there are two types of people. Those are listening and those that are hearing. When one
Mhm.
hears something, it changes them. And so he had laid out the foundation by which I tell you guys, if you're going through a journey, find someone who has been through the stuff. And when they have gone through the stuff, they're able to escort you faster to your destination than you would be able to do it. You will probably save yourself years by getting someone like Aaron into your space as quickly as you can once you recognize that you're moving forward in your journey. So our custom here, Aaron, is to go back. I like to take
Yeah.
people back. One of the first space by which we reside when we come to this planet is our family. And within that mix, there's a lot of stuff going on in there, and our little being is being formed by our thoughts that we're watching around as we see mom and dad and whoever else is in there. Invite us into your family. What was that unit like?
Yeah, it was as with everyone, it was a pretty interesting dynamic. I think we were largely raised in a single parent household by my mom, and not to say my dad wasn't present, but my dad was working on his own career, climbing the corporate ladder, and so with one of those stories where he's putting in 60, 70, 80 hour work weeks. So it was largely up to my mom to run the household, develop us as kids, get us to where we needed to go. And yeah, it was a pretty interesting dynamic where my dad had super high expectations, but wasn't always there to help guide and support. And so the friction that showed up early on in my childhood and even early on in my adult life was trying to meet those expectations without a clear path on how to get there. So that's where some of my big developmental areas showed up of just trying to always hit that target, where it wasn't always clear on how to do it and wasn't always confident that I could do it. So you had that pull on one hand, the mom being the supportive, nurturing one on the other hand. So as I
Yeah.
look back now, it was that interesting yin and yang balance that I got from both of my parents.
Yeah, you sound like me, man, because I had a similar thing with my dad. I just didn't know where that is, where that compass was, but we were trying to find our way. And as youngins, that can be some challenge, if you will. So, as you're in that space with the dichotomy, the yin and yang with the dad and mom, how was this young boy beginning to manage himself within that relationship? I know that you had talked about trying to find your way. What were you trying to um, manage your expectations of your dad, expectations of mom, and not knowing what was he doing amongst all of that?
Yeah, as I look back now, it was a constant search on finding what that definition was for success. And strangely enough, with a lot of the people that I work with today, high performing leaders, it's amazing how that message still rings true. And I think that's kind of
Yeah.
all at the surface and the foundation of what we're all searching for is what is that definition of success? How am I defining success for myself? Am I the one setting that definition, or am I chasing some external standard of what I think someone else is defining success for me, and I'm trying to meet that bar? And so to
Hmm.
answer your question, I think that was the search that I was on of what does success look like? What is success defined as? And am I striving towards achieving that? And I think that's kind of what showed up a lot in my childhood, early adult life, and probably a lot still kind of lingering today of just chasing this ever increasing moving goalpost of what the definition of success looks like.
And as you're moving through your life, unsure as to what it looks like when you're in high school, looking into college, we are all told the programming tells us that we had to hit college next because we've just got lucky and came out of high school alive, because we know how tough that place can be sometimes. And so when you're heading to that direction, Aaron, what were some of the thoughts that you were looking to, and why did you pick the arena that you ended up in?
Yeah, that search can often lead to a crisis. Um, when you are chasing after something that you don't really need, you will never have enough. And I learned that lesson the hard way. And so for me, it was kind of a building of pressure of chasing this ghost, I'll call it, of external definitions of success, whether that's money in the bank account, the brand of the car that's sitting in your garage, the size of your house, the status or title that sits by your name. Um, that was early on in my life how I was thought that success was defined by the more material things, by the external things. And when back to what I said, when you're chasing after the things that you don't really need and aren't really authentically important, you'll never have enough. So there's always going to be more money to go after, different car, bigger house, whatever. Um, and so for me, it was that fork in the road moment and the realization that after I started to achieve some of those quote unquote goals that were showing up under my definition of success, something interesting started to happen. And that was I felt more empty after achieving those things than I did before. And it was almost that realization of this is what I'm working towards. This is what I'm giving up to get. This doesn't, there's no celebration. There's no confetti. There's no party. Um, so it was that realization that I was letting the external environment that I was in set the definition of how I was viewing success instead of that definition coming from inside that was
Yeah.
authentic to me, what really made me feel successful, how I wanted to achieve it. And so that was that big fork in the road moment that changed everything for me about 7 or 8 years ago. And that's what led me into the coaching arena. I went out and hired, just as you mentioned, sometimes we just need some help from the outside to help us see things that we can't naturally see ourselves. And it brought me on to a whole new journey where I realized my passion, my authentic purpose, my definition of internal success was being able to share my experiences and prevent people from going down the path that I was on of chasing the things that don't really matter, only to be the dog that catches the car and, not really knowing what to do after, the dog has a fender in his mouth.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of led me on the journey that's culminated into me launching my own firm to do this full time.
Yeah, I've interviewed millionaires on this platform, and I've had the pleasure of knowing many of them in my life. And the programming is things. The program is never about you. It is always attaining things, and many of these guys had attained things. And as you had stated, they found themselves lacking, if you will, weren't happy, were some of the most miserable people that to be around. And yet, all the things that they had accumulated, everyone else behind them was chasing to go get it. And so you have this wonderful um, mess of folks following the program and realizing when one gets there, he realized, wait a minute, this is a lie. The other one is coming, and didn't recognize and realize that there's a lies ahead of him, and there's some serious stuff. And so when they began to switch and began to look internal, as you stated, the whys, that they began to utilize their money in different ways by which now most of these guys are happy changing the world. That I know quite a few of them that are they're beautiful creatures now that they have found their way. So here you are, Aaron. You've accumulated wealth. You got your money. You find yourself at a crossroad. What was the incident that created that crossroad? You said that you'd gotten all the stuff. You're looking around. Tell us a little as to what was happening inside of you after you got all this fun stuff and you're sitting there. What were those thoughts that were surfacing that you had brought with you as a young man all your life? What were some of those thoughts that were surfacing at that space, at that crossroad, that you noticed and you recognized, wait a minute, I'm going to need some help right here?
Yeah. I think two words really bubble to the surface when you ask that question. One was happiness, right?
Hmm.
That's what we're all chasing. That's what we're all, even if you look at, like, I use the example of my dad. The reason he sacrificed and gave up so much early on was because he felt once I reach this level, once I get this number, I'll be happy then. It's
Yeah,
always, I'll be happy then after I achieve XYZ. And that's just the biggest myth that's out
yeah,
there. And so that's the first word is when I was accumulating all this, by external standards, how my external environment was defining success. Yeah, I was the young rock star. I was the business maverick. I was the one achieving all these things before the age of 30 years old. Um, but those were their definitions of success, and for me, I wasn't happy with the person that I was becoming. I wasn't happy getting the bills that were due for the sacrifices and the compromises, either to my integrity or um, the other elements of my life that made me happy to get those things. And so I realized I was becoming more unhappy the more I achieved and the more that I acquired. And
Hmm.
was a big moment for me of saying, well, this isn't sustainable. If I do this for another 20 years, I think I'll be the most miserable person on the planet. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then the other word that comes to mind was authenticity.
Hmm.
Um, and so I was so caught up in the status and what others thought of me, of how my position looked to the outside world. And it was all about a lack of authenticity because I was living a role, not living presently as my most authentic self. And so those two things were the big overarching catalyst from an emotional standpoint that drove the change. And as I started that journey, I realized exactly how connected those two things were. That if you're
Hmm.
not living authentically, happiness is going to be very, very elusive. You
Yeah.
only find that happiness after you tap into those levels of living your truest, most authentic self. And so I didn't know that ahead of time. It was something as I started to really dial in one of saying, what's most authentic to me? Be damned of what it's looked at or viewed from the outside world. I became okay with being an outsider, being a bit weird, whatever it was in the corporate circles, being called a hippie or whatever. So I created my own unique, authentic self that ultimately led to more happiness. And so that was the big springboard moment for me.
What were some of those things as you began to navigate towards that to find out more about you and the authentic self, as you stated, as you're heading in that direction? What were some of the things that you noticed about you that you realized that you thought was authentic and you realized, what the hell? Because most of us, again, we're bringing these things, these thoughts that had been implanted in us. And as we're becoming more and more successful, and we see, you talked about the happiness and the authentic self and all that, and now you're heading in that direction, you start discovering things about yourself. You know, you start looking and you're going, wow, I never saw that in that light. What were some of those things that you noticed? And what did you do to make those changes in your life?
Yeah, it was a shift in mindset from all about being me um, to where I had an unchecked ego and it was all about me, my progress, my status, and shifting that to the we.
Hmm.
So, what if I applied that same energy and effort to elevate myself to then elevating everyone around me?
Yeah,
And that's both in social connections, that's uh, business connections, but how can I start adding more value? How can I start helping others? How can I start being the person that people would want to go to elevate themselves? And after reviewing some feedback, and even though I had a tremendous amount of success, that didn't make it easy for others to work with me. It wasn't the
yeah,
best experience being a member of my team. I was not viewed as a great leader. I was very um, unempathetic, and I
yeah.
lacked emotion for other people. So I was not the best leader of people. And so that for me was one of the big enlightenment areas of I will actually increase my trajectory by default whenever I'm able to support, nurture, and develop everyone around me to accelerate their path to the next
Yeah.
level. Um, so um, it was a complete war waged against the unchecked ego.
Yeah.
That was the big breakthrough. And lo and behold, if you would have told me at that moment in time that I would be sitting right here talking to you about what I'm now doing in the world and how I'm serving others and making an impact, I would have said, no way. There is
Yeah.
a 0% chance that that would be me just 8 or 9 years from now. But it's amazing how when you can win the war against the ego, find that enlightenment and the awareness that really shifts the mindset. It's strange where passions can emerge.
Yeah. It's I hated the word boss with my team, and I would tell them, no, I'm not the boss. We are a team. I am the
Mhm.
leader of the team, and each one of us has skills to make the team better. And I would tell them, don't call me that, because to me,
Mhm.
um, it created a mindset, and that's what I wanted to get out of my team. That mindset of a boss. Uh, I wanted their input. I wanted all of that because we are a team, and we have a situation that we need to come together as a team and figure out how can we manage this, how can we become and change. And so when I recognized that, again, I had some of the issues that you had, and I started approaching it as a team member, team leader, that when we sat down, we were able to accomplish what we needed to do. We were always ahead of our goals. We were always superseding everything that was required of us because as just that simple word. And I noticed it with all of my team members that when I told them that, because I called a meeting and said, nope, and I am just the leader, that this is my responsibility as a leader and this is yours. But we're moving the ship together. And so
Right.
when we sat down and we had that conversation, I'm telling you, Aaron, everything changed in our department. We were the marketing department, and we began to overproduce our facility was always on top. We were always one of the best because of that mental shift. So it is very important that people understand that, and that is a part of the ego, as you stated earlier. The boss.
Yeah, no, it's and that's why I'm such a student of leadership and why it's the core of what I do today of helping leaders become better leaders and um, leadership in whatever way, shape, or form, whether it's through an official title or in just an informal status, but
Hmm.
leadership at its core is an awesome privilege
Yes.
of being able to be in a position to lead other people. 99% of people in every room want direction, want to be advised on what to do, want to be guided. So, in just about every single room of 100 people, anywhere between 98 and 99 of them want to be led. It takes
Hmm.
the it takes the minority, whether by official title or not, to step up and take on that awesome responsibility and privilege to lead. And when done well, you are able to raise the the performance and the expectations of people even from what they think they're able to do. And so
Yeah.
when you can create an environment, it allows humans to tap into their full potential and become the best version of themselves. But on the flip side of that, when done poorly, like I did for
Hmm.
a good portion of my young career, um, when done poorly, people can shut down and actually
Yeah.
only show up delivering 10 to 20% of their full potential and capability, and never reaching what they're truly capable of. And I think that
Right.
at its core is what's so beautiful about leadership.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So here you are, you're dealing with the ego, and I know some of that. And as you declared, it was a war that needed to this battle. What were some of those tools that you brought into your world to help you fight those battle with the ego? I know for me, I had incorporated meditation, and that had started me off, and it's a big part of my life. I cannot go a day without doing it because I would feel lost because it's such a part of my life. What were some of those things, those tools, if you will, Aaron, that you bring into your warfare in your quiver, as they say, that you were pulling out when you were in the heat of battle?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I echo
Well, you
that.
did say you were a hippie. They call you a hippie, so I know being a
That's
hippie, you got to do a couple of things, man.
yeah, and that's certainly one of them. That was a tool that I also used, and um, developed a very strong meditation practice and got grounded with myself and cleared. It was such a great mechanism to kind of create the right headspace and to
Yeah,
really allow me to zoom out. And develop the awareness and clarity that was lacking for so long. So that was a key piece to it. And then coaching was another aspect. I think just being able to have a coach that was a co-pilot for me, and me being able to share, interact, and engage of really what were the things, what were my new definitions of success, what were my goals to achieve happiness. um, Having that support partner that could provide the systems and the accountability, that could help me see and broaden my perspectives, stretch my own thinking, challenge some of my limiting beliefs and thinking when the old version of me was showing up,
yeah,
was another absolutely critical component to me making that leap from my current state to start moving closer and closer and closer to that ideal state that I was chasing. And help me really go several layers deeper into the why behind everything.
yeah,
Why did I want to change my current state? Why was I trying to develop this new ideal state? Um, so yeah, I think those were, from a tool standpoint, those were two that were really the major needle movers for me, that I still use both of which today. And
yeah.
can't really foresee at any point in the future that I would stop using um, coaching and or meditation. I think they, just like great wine and cheese, they just pair so well.
I love good food, and so I appreciate the analogy. So here you are, you're moving through, Aaron, and as you're moving through and getting to know you, recognizing who you are, the changes that the profound changes that began to take place within yourself. Um, how did your the others around you as you are beginning to change? What was your interaction then with those? And what was their observation as you are making these changes? Because they're looking at this guy who you said was a little different then. And so he is
Yeah.
making some changes and they're going to look at him and go, what's wrong with him? So how was those interaction and what were they noticing? And what was the comments that they were leveling at you as you're moving forward?
Yeah, it's tough. It was tough for a lot of my social circle to really grasp and understand it. I think it was a lot of questions of, well, why would you do that?
Yeah.
You have everything that that we're striving and aspiring to have, and you're giving it, not giving it all up, but taking such a radical change to not prioritize those things. And so, yeah, it took some internal courage and fortitude, and because I knew that there was going to be a massive misunderstanding. There was going to be confusion. I was going to be viewed as an outsider or weird or just flat out different. Um, but I think that's the rent that's due for living your most authentic self. You're never going to you're never going to have a complete 100% understanding by the external world. But I think that's what makes our own, we all have unique journeys, what makes them so special. But that's also the trap that so many people fall into.
Hmm.
So many people don't want to go through that, let's just call it friction of being misunderstood, potentially judged, thought of as weird. So we get into these ruts of life, that I'll call it, that just develops a status quo or a comfort zone where we're appeasing the external environment versus what's inside. And I think that's such a symptom of so much unhappiness and so much emptiness, because so many people never truly live authentically. Um, so yeah, to sit here and say that it was easy and everybody understood and celebrated it and applauded it would be a lie. It was not
Yeah.
celebrated. It was not applauded. I was thought of as strange and weird, and it was a head scratcher for many. But um, a small price to pay to live truly authentic and get closer and closer to that joy and happiness that I was seeking.
Yeah. We talked about, my belief is that the terminology normal is that invisible fence by which they control the masses. And when we step outside of normal, people begin to question our behavior. And it is disturbing to them because we are different in the sense that we have unhooked from what is considered normal. And achieving all the things and the material stuff, that's normal. And
Mhm.
so that's how you ought to behave. You know, they were voicing it. Hey, you have it. We are chasing normal. I mean, you got all the stuff. Why are you disconnecting and becoming different than normal? So it doesn't, they're not able to compute. And many of them, as you state, it really is, a lot of people like living there, Aaron. They prefer to live there. And again, that is one's choice.
Right.
But I worked in a skilled nursing facility, and I had wonderful conversation of people that had made those choices in their 80s and 90s on the bed, dying, and how sad they were saying things that made me recognize that I need to do something different because I don't want to do that, you know. And
Oh,
so
yes.
it is painful to watch that because I saw it over and over again. And to me, that was one of the saddest things that I'd ever seen. While I was listening to the story, it broke me, to recognize that most people are okay with coming all the way to that end that way. And they didn't want to break out. So I lift my hat off. I tell people, I lift my hat off to those that have come out from being normal, you know, because this journey is beautiful. So here you are, you're moving through, you're getting all your help. Aaron, how did you begin to put together your, um, I call it your revelation, your perspective of things into the format by which you have today? How did you begin to notice it? And how did you begin to bring it to life, give birth to it, if you will?
Yeah. I think I stayed curious. I
Mm,
stayed in a learning mode. And if I can give myself credit for anything, it was following interest and new emerging passions that were not on the path that I was on. Um, and as we talked about earlier, it's like it's easy to see the books and the articles and the headlines of saying just follow your passion, just follow your
yeah.
interest. But early on in life, without a lot of experiences, there's no way to know what those things are. It's not
Hmm.
something that you just learn in college and say I'm passionate about that. There is a there is a trial and error, process to this. And the things that you may think would be a passion early on in life actually show up as completely opposite later on in life. And that's what happened to
Yeah.
me. And so as I had this mindset shift and I really started to invest in other people and my ability to lead them, that's where this new passion started to emerge. And so I became curious.
Hmm.
This feels right for me. This feels good. I get fulfillment from this. I get purpose from this. So it just became that little thread that just kept hanging there that I kept pulling on
Hmm.
and pulling on and pulling on. And over the years, that thread just became a gravitational pull where it was
Yeah.
pulling me. It was just like, I look at all the highs and lows of my career, and early on, I wanted to be involved in the strategy and the operations, and really building the machine, so to speak. And again, I wasn't interested in being a great leader, and so doing the
Yeah.
people stuff, that was just like, okay, I'll do it because it's my role. That completely inverted later on in my career. I didn't
Yeah.
get the joy and passion from the strategy and the operations anymore. I was focused on finding the best people I possibly could, putting them in the best possible position I could, and then
Hmm.
developing and nurturing and growing them to see what they could achieve. That's where all of my highs were coming from. And so yeah, that me being curious enough to follow this interest that then became a larger and larger momentum of purpose and fulfillment that then emerged into a passion that then became a gravitational pull that, going back to the point that you just made, I knew it got to a point where I knew if I didn't pursue this and follow this, it was going to be that thing that I was going to look back on at 80 years old on that
Yeah.
bed saying, what if?
Yeah.
What if? It wouldn't have mattered all the things that I would have accomplished or the wealth that I would have accumulated. What would have sit heaviest for me on that bed would have been, I never followed that to the point
Yeah.
that I knew I should have. I never took the leap. Um, so I was not going to let this new passion show up as a regret from me not pursuing it.
Yeah. I tell my sons, find your passion and be passionate about it. Um, because when you find that and you are working where everyone else thinks it is working, you're not working. You're doing 20 hours, as I say. If you had 40 hours a day, you'd be in there for 40 hours. And to them that is watching, that's work. But to you, that's life. It's
That's
something
right.
different. It is where you obtain your power. It is where you get your strength. It is where you get your wisdom. Outside of that is where you get a chance to rest. You are not working when you're doing that. And that's what I would tell my kids: find your passion and be passionate about it, because it is not work anymore. It's totally different. It is something that gives you strength. And so here
Where the,
you are.
yeah,
Go ahead.
where
Go
the
ahead.
work feels like play is where you'll always find the mastery.
There it is, right there. Um, and you guys that are listening to us, I invite you to get into Aaron's space to learn how to play. It is a great place to be. The mindset there is different. That when you are chasing things, um, things are fleeting. It's you attain it and you want the next one, and there is no solidness to that. It's a moving target in the sense that when you grab it, you want the next thing, you want the next thing, and you're always chasing the next thing. And there's no fulfillment or when you get there, because we've always been there. I've been there. I was driving sports car when I was a young kid, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And when everyone was trying to look at me and I was getting all of this stuff, it doesn't mean anything. As Aaron talks about, you start looking at it going, wait a minute, is this all there is? Um, there is something else. And is there's this playground that he mentioned, and the stuff there, the stuff there, guys, I'm telling you, everything is beautiful there. So Aaron, invite us to one of those um, times, those special times. And I think for me, it is one of the most, um, for lack of a better word, I call it, it's a precious, holy space by which when we're engaging in that conversation with someone and they began to get it, if you will, the
Mm.
eyes began to light up. You began to notice, because I tell people the purpose of getting a coach is that the coach will listen to you and they will locate you based on what you're saying and where they have been. They know that familiar terrain. And you don't know the question that is necessary that you need to ask yourself to get you out of there. But that coach does know it. And so
Mhm.
he or she will ask you that question, and it is that question that will save you years of your life. In a twinkling of an eye, just pops, and your eyes began to come out. But that coach knows, and he and she's waiting for that, and he recognizes when it happens to you, and he's just waiting. He or she's waiting there to welcome you to this new perspective, this new space that you will run with and change your life. Invite us to one of those events, Aaron, when you recognize it after whatever amount of time that you were with that individual and it began to make sense to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll add to what you just said. And it's also when you think about those monumental, thought provoking questions, if we were just asking those questions to ourselves of just the voice in our head, something interesting happens. There's no obligation to even answer them. It could just be an
Yeah,
empty question that we ask ourselves. But having to get those thoughts out into the universe with another person unlocks a bunch of magic.
yeah,
And I, a lot of my a lot of my mythology is built on programs because I want people to leave with things that they can use on their own for years and years to come. And so I'll share one of my programs that I kind of, and this will take up an entire hour
yeah,
for me and the client just to think through this program or tool. That's a series of 3 questions that I wish someone would have sat down and walked me through back when I needed it the most. And to your point, this would have this would have shaved years of inefficiency off my life. So here's the 3 questions. One, like we've talked about earlier, how are you defining success for yourself? Get crisp, get articulate, get that, go deep to find that answer of creating the definition of success that you want for yourself, not what your external environment wants, but really get clear on what it means for you to determine yourself a success. That's the first question. Question number 2, what does happiness look like for you? So go through the same exercise, but around happiness. Envision what an ideal life looks like for you. What does it look like? What's your average day? What's going to fill up your day to where when you go to bed, you have joy and happiness? And then the third question, and this is where it all comes together. This is where we land the plane. Question number 3 is based on your responses to those first 2 questions, do those 2 things align and work in harmony together, or are they in conflict of each other? That's where the rubber meets the road. And so many times people will think about how they're defining success, how they're defining happiness, and they don't connect. They don't
yeah,
meet each other. And a specific example I'll give you is I was working with an insurance executive one time, and he was very adamant that he wanted to be in the top 2% in the nation because that's how he was defining success. This is the type of revenue and financial standings he would get if he could just break into the top 2%. And then we switched the gear to question number 2 is like, well, what does happiness look like for you? It's like, oh, the whole reason I'm in this game is for the freedom and the flexibility to be able to break away and go to my son's basketball games and work from anywhere and spend time on the river, blah 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 blah. And his path to get there was to be in the top 2%.
Yeah.
And so I asked him, what does the life look like of someone who's currently in the top 2%? And, in your industry. And
Mm.
he didn't even really think about it. It's like, oh, they're working all the time. They're working 6 days a week. I'm sure they've got teams of 40 people. They got a whole HR department. It's crazy. So
Yeah.
that's when I saw the lightning bolt hit is to be in the top 2%. You've got to be willing to do what the other 98% is not willing to do. But
Yeah.
based on how you're defining happiness, you need the balance. To be in the top 2%, you by definition have to give up balance. And so
Hmm.
it was an enlightening moment for him to
Yeah.
say, how I'm defining happiness does not match how I'm defining success. They're in conflict with each other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a prime example.
Yeah, that is a beautiful space for that individual as well as that coach, recognizing and assisting that person to recognize it. And those of you guys that have been listening to us, we've been chatting for a little while, excavating his wisdom and his knowledge so that you can have access to him. The reason why I usually probe the guests that come here is so that you, the audience, can see the quality of that person that is before you so that you can get into their space and be a part of their world. And I just love you guys getting, because I get some answers and emails and stuff about people telling me, thanks for this person, it saved my life. So I am honored to have Aaron here with you guys because he is able to help some of you with those eight personality boys and girls that are pushing through as we are familiar with them and the price you pay for this. And we know that many of you, when you get home, we've been there. We know what you're thinking. And I have someone that is able to help you answer those questions that you're asking yourself as you're closing down the night, having that sip of wine, coming down from that long, tough day. So we know it. We are familiar with it. I have someone that can guide you through. And I'm going to provide all of this information because I want you guys to get into his space and get into that playground, man. Aaron, this has been a wonderful, wonderful exchange. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real joy and real pleasure.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.